Welcome to the Finance Village podcast, where we navigate the dynamic relationship between financial professionals, their industry, and the clients they serve in an ever-changing landscape. We open important topics and gather as well as challenge the insights of advisors such as financial planners, mortgage brokers, accountants, realtors, and more. Join us as we delve into the intricacies of finance, the financial industry, and financial professionals, as well as their profound impact on individuals and communities. It takes a village of advisors to take good care of any client, and a village of comrades in this industry for us to see great success together. Let's begin. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Finance Village. My name is Sheldon Bro, and I'm here with my co-hosts Nick Giovanetti and Simon Wong. And today we're going to be talking about all things succession planning for financial advisors' books of business. And we know this conversation's been had many times. We're going to have it. We're going to try to make it a little more interesting, and we're going to be very frank about a lot of things today. And I'll let Nick and Simon just go ahead and share their thoughts on where you think we should be taking the conversation and direction today.
Yeah, let's jump into this. This is such a hot topic because, we're always in the field hearing about senior advisors, struggling to meet young advisors, struggling to find somebody to succession plan, struggling to build out their business and scale it out, because I think a lot of times they want to have it, but they're afraid to loosen up the reins and walk away. That I think we should start talking about it from another perspective. I'm part of the demographic that is growing, scaling, looking to acquire, looking to join big firms. And, there's certain things I'm looking for as well. I don't know about you, Simon, or you, Sheldon, but we're the buyer, and in a lot of times the buyer has a little bit more power than the seller, I think, is willing to give us credit for. So I'm excited to unpack this.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it is a very interesting topic, just because if you take a look at the demographic of advisors, especially independent advisors, it really skews way towards the more baby boomer generation. You're looking at, I think last time I talked to an MGA, they said their average age of an advisor in their office was probably 67. And if you go to most events, for every one advisor that is under 40, there's probably 10 advisors over 60. And yet there's very little transition that actually happens, which is maybe what we'll probably be talking about today. Maybe what's going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of books out there, but and every young advisor wants to buy a book, but why isn't any of these transitions happening? So,
well, it's interesting the way you guys because honestly, I think the conventional way to think about it is always, oh, well, there's an advisor that has a book of business, and it's like this. It's a big deal. Of course, it's something that young advisors, it's a lot easier, obviously, than doing it organically, though there is something to be said for that experience. But you never really think about it, turning the tables where it's like, yeah, you should be courting somebody that you truly want to take good care of your clients. And the perception, at least for myself, when I started learning about this, is, well, it's all about the God in that situation is the advisor that's selling their book. But the way that, Nick started to explain that makes sense. Like, you do have to be very serious about courting in the other direction as well.
Yeah, 100%. Good examples are, I've come across it a number of times where the advisor who has a strong established business, they're feeling in a way like there's not enough good young talent to bring into their business. But what I'm actually seeing is that it's a little bit more of a control factor that's actually pushing away the young advisors and making their businesses look a little less attractive. Number one could be technology. They don't have good technology in their business. Number two, it could be that it's not well thought out how those generations are going to be implemented along the way. Like, a selling advisor might be thinking about their book 5 years into the future. Well, the buying advisor is thinking about it 10, 20, 30 years into the future. Like if I'm buying something, is this going to whittle away and turn into nothing? Am I going to have to work just as hard to try and retain this book as potentially just building my own from scratch? You know, is the revenue worth the squeeze? Is the juice worth the squeeze? So I would say that, you know, Simon, you've had some experience in this area. I've had a little bit. And I'm even curious, Sheldon, if this takes place in the mortgage side of the business and how people on the mortgages navigate this. So I would say that courting is important, but also respecting the young advisor and what they bring to the table is equally as important.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask the producer to right around this spot right here, insert that wonderful video that Simon has on his LinkedIn that he created. I won't. I'll just let the video speak for itself. But I definitely was able to empathize with that. On the mortgage side, I think it's tough. You know, I haven't really fervently pursued any books of business. I've you know, had people that I thought might have one, but there, I think on our side it's a lot less goodwill, because you're only doing a mortgage transaction once in a while. Mortgage brokers and realtors, I don't care what any of us want to believe, because I think I'm the most charming mortgage broker I can be. It's not easy for somebody to remember you 4 or 5 years later or 7 years later, or whenever it is that you actually decide to do something else. And the average person makes change every 3.5 years, but there's a ton of goodwill is the punchline required in that. So the thing that you guys were talking about with showing, like, I guess what does that look like? So you guys right now, I guess we'll give all full and fair disclosure. You guys right now are both in the process of transitioning a book from some seasoned veterans over to yourselves. And I'll throw out a quick stat before I pass this back to you, because I just read it this morning. There's different things that impact, but one of the bigger things at 15%, or some of the other ones are around 10 or so, other than obviously the size of the book and other stuff like that, was the use of technology and streamlining processes. I know a guy I've mentioned in the podcast before. He bought a book of 1,200 clients, and everything that Buddy had was manual. He said he would have paid, and he used the words, significantly more if it had been digitized. And it's nothing to take for granted. It's cool if you're complacent at the end of your career and you don't really want to do much to change it. But if you want to really pass it on in an intelligent way, make sure your clients are properly taken care of, they don't get lost in the cracks, and you're actually making the return that you want on it so that you can ride off sunset, then you got to take it seriously.
Yeah, I would say, how messy is this book, and how much labor intensive work is it going to be for us to manage this book and make it like our own? Because a lot of books out there, are they really a business? Are you really buying their business, or are you just buying a block of clients that like this particular advisor and their unique way of doing things, and they might not necessarily want to work the way that you want things to work? So I think, even from my perspective, I'm looking at it almost like a franchise. When I buy a McDonald's, it's going to run and function a certain way. I know I could own that McDonald's, and it's probably going to be fairly profitable as long as I follow the system. When I'm looking at a certain book of business, if that advisor operates that thing the way that I don't particularly like, or it's more their special secret sauce as to why clients are dealing with them, is that really a profitable book? Is that something you would ever really want to buy? Or do you have to change who you are as an advisor to try and retain those clients? Do I have to pretend to be the ex-advisor that I just, bought their business from?
You know what I think the issue is, Nick? I think the issue is that most advisors do not approach it as a business. They approach it like they're a financial advisor, basically, and they're out there selling investments and they're selling insurance. And after a while of doing this, after a few years, it turns into this multi-$100,000 business where, they didn't really think about, planning 5, 10, 20 years ahead. They didn't think about a succession plan. And I think the difference is that our generation of advisors coming into it, we do see it as a business. We do look at trying to make things as efficient as possible, making sure that, we're not only just compliant on all the transactions we do, but that, we're doing what's best for the client. And we're looking at it like, we're trying to balance both those aspects of being profitable, running the business efficiently, and making sure the clients are taken care of. And I don't think necessarily most of the older advisors we deal with view themselves as business people, and we've seen it ourselves. There's advisors out there that have had businesses for decades and they're not incorporated. They're not, they don't have any back end technology. They don't have any, they haven't looked at their processes. They haven't documented their processes. So the new advisors shifting in has no idea how they do things, what they've done in the past. And it's just unfortunate. That's just the way they were trained, right? And most of the older advisors were trained to be salespeople. They weren't trained to run a business.
Well, yeah, and I will say that is one thing that they definitely got a lot of good craftsmanship on the sales side. But I guess you're advocating for, like Jay-Z's lyric, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a business man." And admittedly, I think in the very first few weeks that we quickly realized that we wanted to become that digital national brokerage, I remember thinking like that, like you just, and it is kind of a weird way to think, like you're just this person that exists that does this service, but you really, I guess it kind of almost sounds like you guys are saying, think about building that business and that different mindset from day one. You're building the value of your book from day one. Every time you do a good job on entering notes in your CRM, every time you have things in an orderly fashion, and it's not a younger generation laziness, it's an efficiency to put you at your highest best use so you can give them the best kind. You know how you always hear the older folks talk about, especially the clients, where they're like, back in the day, I used to walk into my bank and just shake his hand and he gave me the money. He didn't check my credit or any of that stuff. So we're able to offer the highest level of that human touch. Unfortunately, there's a lot more frauds. We still got to keep it compliant because you're efficient. That's the goal. You're not trying to be lazy or go on longer vacations. It's for the best service, right?
Well, here's the funny thing. Like, as an employee, when I was an employee, I hope none of my previous bosses ever see this. But as an employee, when you're being paid by the hour, when you're being paid a salary, you don't find efficiencies. You just work. You just get your work done. You got 40 hours. You're assigned, you're assigned a certain amount of work a week. You take that whole 40 hours to get the work done, because you have to be at work. That's the difference. But when you're self-employed, and if I've got 40 hours of work and every week I find ways to shave off that time and I can get that work done in 10 hours, I'm going to find a way to get that work done in 10 hours so I can go do other stuff. Or in our case, me and Nick's case, we tend to want to take on more work, right? So realistically, and the problem is I see this a lot with older advisors. They don't do that. They will do things, everything's done on paper. They will have everything, their documents filled out on paper. They'll scribble them themselves, or they'll have their assistants do it. They'll drive out to get a signature. They will, they'll, even before getting to the signature, they will go look through their manual filing system to pull out the files and read over that file. While us will have everything on a CRM. Sometimes there's too many notes on there. I don't even read all the notes. I'll pump that into ChatGPT, summarize the last 20 years, and tell me what's going on. And I'll have my assistant fill out a DocuSign, and I'll determine whether or not I have to drive to that meeting. Because if I can do something in 5 minutes, why would I spend an hour driving there? 30 minutes, another 30 minutes talking to the client, another hour chit-chatting with them, another hour driving back, looking through the files. You could waste a whole day doing nothing, basically.
It's true, but I do want to just quickly jump in, sorry, Nick, with just a little bit of advocacy for our seasoned veterans, because I think that there's a level of balance. So I'll give you an example. I know a guy, and you guys know this guy as well, who's a little on the older, he's up amongst that closer to that average age, but not like way up there. And I'll tell you, I've seen this man take notes on a napkin, but then the notes that he ends up translating himself, not through his assistant, into an email that he then sends to his assistant, put in the CRM, are absolutely superb. So I think that, and there's, on the occasion, certain clients that it warrants a visit to drive up. I got love for that. But as far as making that a common practice, or making it so that you're trying to you know, if people want to write on paper, that's cool, but still make sure that you have a really efficient process after that. Don't be driving out for every single client, because not every client wants to be waiting for you to come knock at the door. But just let me click a button on an email. Like, that's not a good use of their time always either. And it's not, sometimes we probably think we're doing a great thing, and maybe they don't actually want that. Because I can tell you, I used to think I was the awesomest guy ever when I was giving unbelievably full and fair disclosure, where really it was just excessive information and eyes would gloss over. So I think that it is also kind of what the clients want too.
See, as soon as you say that, my response to that is, well, why would you write everything? Why would you write it on a piece of paper or a napkin? Why wouldn't you bring your laptop, record it on Fireflies, have it transcribe the whole thing, record everything so you don't miss anything?
Oh yeah, you got me.
Summarize the notes.
You got me. Okay, you got me. I was thinking about the typing, because I'm one of those like 3-finger typers where I'm pretty quick with 3 fingers, and not everybody can like do the thing up. But yeah, you got me. There's no reason not to do that.
And
nowadays our young hands that get sore when we're writing. So
yeah, and honestly, the way I see it is, you know what, there's work, and then I mean, obviously there's there's a degree of socializing with the client as well. Why mix the two, right? You can get all your work done and do another social thing and have fun. And I'm again thinking efficiency. Why don't we do a mini golf thing with 10 clients at once instead of seeing one? That way we're hitting a bunch of clients at once. So I am very about getting efficiency and getting as much done as possible, where I don't think that's necessarily the case for most people, especially now that I work for myself. Like, you know, the average advisor, if he can do 1 to 2 financial plans a week, I think that I can do 5 to 6. Right?
Yeah, what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
There's too much weight, I think, being put on it from the older generation of advisor, that we're not as in tune with our clients, because we might use some note-taking AI tool during a meeting, so that I'm not sitting here trying to remember what I'm typing. I'm actually listening to you. I'm paying attention to you. I can take all of these automatically generated notes off when you're not sitting in front of me, and review things that I maybe didn't remember from the conversation. But I'm no more engaged in, I'm actually way more engaged in our conversation if I'm not concerning myself with taking a proper, full, thorough note, or asking them to stop their train of thought while I handwrite something in the middle of a meeting, instead of just letting that meeting flow. Just let it happen, right? Let that 30, 45-minute conversation happen. I know that our assistants here at the office, a lot of the notes that I summarize for them to put into our CRM, I didn't write those summaries. Those summaries were created and generated a lot from an AI note taker that I reviewed after to make sure that they were accurate, but I saved myself ample amount of time. So like you said, Simon, I can do 5 times the amount of work that some of these older advisors have built their businesses around, doing 1/5 of the amount of work, being way less efficient, missing opportunity. The cost of running their business is way higher. So I think from a buying advisor, when I look at a business that I might want to bring in, it's no longer what's your AUM, what's your assets under management, what's your revenues, because there's so many other layers of your business that if I have to come in there and completely rebuild it, it's not valuable to me, right? If anything, it's going to be annoying.
Yeah, you guys just made, but with those 2 points, it indisputable, because literally it's every conceivable benefit. There's no reason an advisor wouldn't want to just talk to and focus on a client. It's going to be more efficiency. And I would say this is another big benefit, because you've got to use AI, because that means you can learn how to interact with AI. As we've already seen, you have to be interacting with it. Nuance is the key to the human. There's so much infinite nuance. That's why we have to give more nuanced instruction. But even if you want to, still you do the AI thing that you guys are suggesting with recording it, and you can look at it afterwards. And surely our memories are always good enough right after the conversation to say, okay, or even during, if you want to write down 2 or 3 things, you understand how AI works if you're interacting with it, and you probably have a good guess on what nuance it's not going to catch, right? And you can either do that afterwards or before, but what you guys are saying makes perfect sense. There's no reason whatsoever to be writing, typing much these days.
Yeah. So, there's a reason why we're not taking horses to meetings or sending carrier pigeons to deliver messages or using quill and ink, because technology's expanded way past that. And we're seeing now in the past 20 years, technology is accelerating at a pace faster than most people can keep up with it. And if unfortunately, if you're near the end of your career, you got to start looking, is it really worth my time to learn all these things and to understand it if it's not gonna really add to my life or make my life a little bit easier? I mean, unless you're really interested in that kind of stuff, which I don't think most people are. I think that the pace of technology has gone so quickly in the last 10 years, is that it's leaving a lot of unfortunate people behind if you don't stay up to date with it. And all three of us know this more than anyone, that we're constantly trying to fight and learn new tech, and we're constantly looking at new things, and all three of us do it constantly to understand what efficiencies we can gain. But not only that, like, how can we make the experience with the client even better? Like, even something as simple as, me and Nick have talked about this before, putting together a slick presentation or a deck to show the client. And a lot of clients are visual learners. We can do it in less than 30 minutes a lot of times, sometimes maybe an hour. And we'll talk to some not even necessarily older advisors, but workers that may not have the level of experience we do when it comes to tech, and they'll take 2 days to put that together, and they would have taken a good 16 hours to do that. um, so it's not even learning to use the tech, but learning to use it quickly, I think.
Well, and to add to that and unpack that a little, Simon, because we're talking about succession planning from a buyer's perspective, we often, I feel, at least some of the conversations I've been in or seen, is we're there singing for our supper, trying to get this selling advisor to vet us. Like, we're begging for the date, right? We're begging for the relationship. When in the flip side is, I'd way rather work with an open-minded advisor who's been around for a little while, that says, hey, wait a minute, Simon, that stuff's really interesting. You're implementing what? And having them almost come to us and show that they're open to growth. They're open to making modifications to the business. They're open to efficiencies and changing and adapting and modifying the tech stack in the practice. Because that excites me as a buying advisor. I'm thinking, okay, I can work with this business owner that I eventually want to become partner with and buy and see drift off into the sunset.
Let me sum up a lot of this with a quick question to both you guys. I want both of you to give some insight into. If you're giving advice, let's just say that you met one of your uncles you haven't seen since you were 8. He's an older financial advisor. You're not looking to buy he just comes to you as a younger guy to say, how should I approach this? What should be my, keeping in mind the things that you want and the things that he's used to and he or she thinks they want. What's your advice to them as far as what does the time frame look like, and what does the empowerment of reins look like? Because obviously, when you first come in, they're not going to give you full control to just revamp everything, because who knows if a month later you're going to freak out or whatever else. So what is your advice you'd give somebody as to somebody you care about that's retiring, that you want to give good advice, and then some ballpark time for what that looks like? And that includes, again, giving the reins on some things such as changing processes, evolving things, stuff like that.
So I the thing is, I think that the answer to that question is very difficult. The reason being is that I don't think retirement or succession planning looks the same to every advisor. Some advisors are going to take a step back. Some advisors are going to fully want to take a step back. Some advisors want to still stay in the business forever, working side by side with the existing advisor. And I think that's a big issue right now, is that a lot of advisors, they think that succession planning means that they step away from the business completely and they don't have to deal with it ever again. And that scares a lot of people, because a lot of advisors will, especially older ones, will lose purpose. They feel like this job gives them purpose. The secondary thing is that there's obviously, there's the money aspect as well, right? Like, most books only sell for 2 to 3 times trailers. If you just kind of half-ass service that book, realistically, you're going to get way more money with very little work to keep that book. So is it really financially worth it for them? So I guess my comment to that is, everybody that is looking to sell their book, really, when you're an advisor, you should understand what is a good retirement for you actually look like before we can really make a comment on that. Because the advisor that says, I just want to step away and I never want to deal with this again, that's very different than an advisor like my advisor Robert, that says, I want to work with you for the next 10 years. I'm going to take a little bit of a step back, you take a step forward, be kind of the front runner. That's a completely different type of succession plan and a completely different type of plan that we do.
And I'd also add to that, like with Larry and I, our conversations were all around me hoping that Larry sticks around for a long time, hoping that he wants to be in the business, regardless of how much he's going to be engaged, how much he takes a step back. But I absolutely would never want to buy a book of business where the advisor just up and bails. They get their check and they're gone. And I also wouldn't want to partner or buy or be a part of a book of business where an advisor says, I will never leave. I'm going to be here until I'm 6 feet under. Because I also think that they're ones that can't let go, and they probably are not going to give their clients a good experience. There is no way that a 75-year-old, 80-year-old advisor, if they're still alive and kicking and doing business, is going to be providing good service to their clients. Their clients are probably going to be similar in age. And that means that the next generation is not well retained within the book. So the moment that their clients start passing away and that intergenerational wealth transfer starts to occur, they haven't talked to the children. Or if they have, the children are like, you know what, as much as I love this planner, they didn't properly build a business. There's not another layer of planners there to look after me, right? When I get my parents' wealth, I'm not going to work with a 70, 80-year-old advisor because I'm not even 40 yet. Whatever I plan out with that advisor, I'm not going to be around. So I'm looking for advisors as a buying advisor, one that wants those layers, right? One of the best books I ever seen, and then my buddy will know this if he watches this or listens to this, is his father was a baby boomer generation. Let's just for easy math, he was 65. And then what he did is he actually brought in a 55-year-old advisor who had some extra layers of specialty, but was a part of the front running team. And then he brought in another 45-year-old advisor who had some extra specialties, but was a front runner of the team. And then my buddy was brought in as a 35-year-old who had different, specialties, but again, front runner of the team. He had a decade apart layering in his practice. So what does that do to the business? Now you've got
so smart.
maybe you got some 65-year-old clients. Well, their 35-year-old clients are going to want to work with you because they can see the layers of team. Right? Nobody expects their advisor to live forever or to be around forever, but you expect their firm and their business and what they're doing for you to be around and hopefully outlive whatever the top advisors are.
So how early, you're making me wonder now, how early should people be looking at succession planning? Because if you just die, and let's say that you're going to stay, let's say that you're 60 and you're going to stay in it for 10 more years. If you die randomly, what happens to your book of business?
You should always have a succession plan just in case that happens, right? You should always be working with partners. That's why me and Nick like working together. It's probably not possible. It's highly unlikely that, that we well pass, but at the same time, you never know. Right. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure our clients are taken care of. And from even a perspective of doing better business, it's always good to have other partners in the business that have different skill sets than you, that can complement your skill sets. And I think that's the problem, is that people always look at succession planning as a far off thing. But that's just like, it's just like when we deal with risk mitigation, right? And estate planning. A lot of accountants will deal with estate planning, assuming you're going to die at 85, average age. But realistically, there's a huge chunk of people that don't make it to there due to a number of circumstances. And you should always have a plan for now versus also in the future. And I just don't think most people do. And I think last time I was at an Advocates event and they asked the room how many people have a succession plan. There was 50 advisors in the room. I think 4 people put up their hands. So,
wow.
Absolutely. And it's not to any fault of the young advisors. Young advisors are out there looking. They're wanting to partner with senior advisors. They're also wanting to learn and be growing in this space. And I think that it's a lot of fear. I think a lot of the selling advisors are fearful that they're going to lose control, give up their business. They're not going to be relevant or valuable, or maybe the clients are going to like dealing with some of these younger advisors. But Simon, I got to ask you, and this happens all the time. How many times do we meet with some fairly well-established late 30, early 40-year-old business owners or clients or whomever, and we're talking to them about their wealth, and they've come to us for some financial planning, some wealth management, even some estate planning per se. And they talk about how, and often they'll say, you know what, my parents had some great advisors in their life. They had a great team. You know, my mom and dad's person was awesome. They helped get me going when I was 18. But I don't want them to be my planner because they don't have anybody my age. They don't have anybody who's, I feel like, is going to be around for 20 or 30 years. So when you think from all these advisors, these older advisors, like, you don't have much to sell if you're not looking after your clients that way. It always comes back to how well are these clients looked after. If your clients, if your younger generation clients don't want to work with you because you're so closed off that you won't welcome in young and new and upcoming generational advisors and train and groom them to provide great service for these clients, really every day that goes by, your book and your business becomes less and less valuable.
Well,
And I think it's just a lot easier for these older advisors to continue to do business when they do have a succession plan. I see even Robert, it's not just that he is more motivated now. He has a young guy in his team, but a lot of clients he approaches, I think the number one objection of an advisor in their twilight years is are you still going to be around? You know, when I'm 80, when I'm 90, to make sure everything's taken care of. What's your health like? What happens if you get sick for a few months? What's going to happen to me? And when you say, hey, I've got Nick, Simon on the team. They're two young guys. They're 30 years younger than me. They're both healthy. It changes the perspective of the client to, instead of worrying about those kind of things, now they, in their head, they're like, well, we've got the experience of these 60-year-old advisors with the youth of these other younger advisors that can eventually take over and help him out. So I think it is a huge benefit to any older advisor's business to have some younger advisors. And I think even me and Nick, I think with our business, we're always looking for good partners. And I think that, taking a look at some of the younger generation of advisors, eventually once our business really gets going, we'll be looking for advisors in their 20s, right? To kind of pull in and kind of help us as paraplanners and help us write that. Because the other bad thing about the business is that there's very little training. You just kind of have to learn things on your own and figure it out, unless you work at a corporation, which is where me and Nick kind of came from, is a corporate background. But I can't even imagine being an independent advisor starting with no training. You wouldn't survive.
Well, I want to ask you guys this real quick. What do you say to the advisor that has CUSIV that doesn't, like, of those room, you say only 4 out of the, like, say 50. I'm not ready. I haven't found the one yet. Do you have a business continuity person, like as an emergency contingency if something happens to you? What do you do in that case? Or just, where does it go?
Oh, where does it just goes back to the dealership. All the clients usually.
So it'll be a lottery. It'll be a random draw of who I as a client end up with. Not really any intention there. So
there's a common term in the
should
business.
Somebody have an emergency savings plan, advisor, succession plan until they find the one, or how does that work?
Well, I'd say client beware. Like, if any clients are out there listening to this, like, something happens to your advisor and they don't have any type of succession that even you're aware of, you become a term in the industry called orphan, an orphaned client, an orphaned account, meaning unless you call in and try and talk to somebody and then they reassign you to just a random, who knows who it's going to be, but you are orphaned. No client wants to be orphaned. So even when you're looking for advisory teams to work with, start asking those questions of your advisor, because a lot of advisors don't move unless they feel some pressure. If their clients start asking, hey, how are you building out your business? Are you bringing in 35-year-old CFPs? Are you bringing in the next generation of advisors? Who are my kids going to work with? Right? I would rather my kids work with my team so that I know my wishes are going to happen the way I want them to happen. Right? You're telling me to bring my kids in and talk to you. I want to talk to your extended team.
That's very interesting. So what you always hear about, it's the assumed, yes, of course, you don't just wait for your clients to die off. Your goal is to continue to plant seeds and deepen your relationship with their family and help the younger generations. I don't know if I see that as much as I hear it talked about, or I don't see effective methods. What is that? What do you guys see that looking like? And do you see that advisors are doing an effective job of that?
I would say certain advisors that are really engaged, that keep their finger on the pulse of the industry, they start looking for some partnerships and next generation. But generally speaking, like Simon mentioned at an advocates event, I'm a president of an advocates chapter, and we all talk about it and we all see it. And it's that there's no next generation. Even a lot of the next generation advisors are not joining associations like advocates, where all of these senior, gray-haired advisors are hanging out. So if even that's not being passed down, having memberships and being a part of associations that paved the way for the last generation of advisors, I'd say we've got massive problems all around.
Scarcity. I once had an older advisor. He wasn't too old. He was probably close to 60 at the time that I knew him many years ago. And I know he wanted me to like take me under his wing because he saw, he thought I was a personable guy, and he started making all these internal calls. And he sat me down one time and talked about the value of scarcity with clients, like having this. The way I felt it was being conveyed to me was like, you're not making yourself like readily available. You're like in this prestigious position, kind of like a doctor, where you provide scarcity. And I didn't feel like that's how I wanted to run a business. I like at least doing everything that I can to make, if the client can't talk to me, they can talk to someone, but being like very responsive and very, very available. And I may be wrong in this thinking. It's probably not always the most efficient thing for being, I guess, selfish with my time, but making the clients always get quick responses and stuff like that. Do you guys see what improvements, I guess, do you guys see in technology being able to communicate with the client and make yourself readily available in a digital format, even if not, you're able to be on the phone with them at that moment?
So I think that the problem with that attitude is that a lot of older advisors do have that attitude that, there's a scarcity mentality where you don't have to call the client back right away. You don't have to get this and done right away. But the problem is that's an attitude from the 90s, the 80s. And people have a different expectation of service now, right? Like that was the generation that grew up like, okay, we got to wait till 8 o'clock to watch a TV show. We don't do that anymore. Oh, we gotta run off to the record store to buy a record. We gotta try to book a reservation at this nice restaurant, and then maybe go there in a week. No, we have Skip the Dishes. We have a DoorDash. Everything is at the fingertips of people, and people have that expectation now. And if you want to wait, if someone emails you and you wait 2 or 3 days to respond to that email, I actually don't think that's acceptable nowadays by any client standards. And especially if it's urgent and they're like, I need to withdraw this money. I had something happen. And you wait a few days to respond to that person's going to be in a bit of a panic because they know that, you have availability. Like if they can't get a hold of you in email, phone, over social media, I would be concerned if that was how I was dealing with a professional, and I shoot them a quick email and just asking them a simple question like to my accountant or lawyer, and they take a week to respond to me. I don't think that would be acceptable. And I feel it's the same nowadays with financial advisors. Like you have so much tech at your fingertips, from CRMs to shared emails, to helping making sure that even your assistant can take a look at it. AI can craft quick responses. You can review all these responses. Like I've seen advisors, especially younger ones, where basically they'll have a list of emails. Their what's it called? Their assistants or even AI will craft it. They'll go through it, make sure it's right, hit send, 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 send. You can respond to 50 people in less than 10 minutes, and all you have to do is scan it over. So I honestly would say there's almost, unless it's a really complex issue,
But then you can acknowledge, right?
acknowledge it.
My existence quickly.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I think that's a huge issue in our industry, is that and back to I guess back to the buying and the selling of the book. If that's the attitude the advisor has, that book is going to lose value very quickly, because there's no way the next generation, that being Gen X, millennials, or even Gen Z, would think that's okay at any point. That if they shoot an email, the advisor takes a week to call them back. So,
Well, and I'd say that's kind of one of those big pieces of good advice is if regardless of whether it's a younger advisor or not, if any other person is coming in intimately being involved in your book in some way, shape, or form, and they have feedback as to what they think is like an updated psychology in the population of people or whatever else, it shouldn't be scoffed at. It should be, certainly be a good conversation.
Absolutely. I think that you might have said it earlier, Sheldon, or maybe we were talking about it offline, but you talked about courting the relationship on both sides. I think that's hugely important. The buying advisor, you got to ask questions. You are in control. You're in the driver's seat. You're the future. This person's trying to sell you their business. If that business is not efficient, if it's not running the way it needs to run, if they haven't done a good job providing top-notch service for their clients, stop being clouded by, oh, they have this many assets under management, or, oh, they have this many clients. These very lackluster reasons as to why to buy a business, right? Buy something that you see value in, what you want out of that business. And that's why I think we need to change the imaging of how all of these senior advisors that have larger books of business out there that are very closed off and small-minded when it comes to bringing in and building their business out from the ground up. Like, take control back. Refuse to pay 3 or 5 times multiples on these businesses that don't have efficiency, terrible technology. They're not running good client service.
And if they do, at least they should be willing to listen to evolving it, right? Because that's not a red stop sign right up front if they don't have them evolve, but be willing.
Be willing, be open-minded. I know that Larry and I have, he ran a great business, but he ran his business in a way that was, it was struggling to keep up with efficiency. And when I came in, and our partnership really accelerated because he was so open-minded to it. And the admin that were here were so open-minded to it. And we actually we courted each other for a good 6 months to a year and said, you know what, we love working together. We had so much in common in the way that we thought about the business. And even though he had been in the business a lot longer than me, he probably did the same thing back then. He was edging and pushing where the industry was probably 30 years ago. So, think about that. And that was exciting to partner with somebody like that, because there already is, it's almost like inheriting wealth. Simon and I were meeting with a client the other day that they said, I feel like I'm starting not from the finish line. I'm starting from halfway through the course, because my family did such a good job with their estate planning. They left me such a nice nugget. Like, I feel like I can really launch it even farther. Well, if a young advisor can find that right senior advisor, you're not starting from the finish line anymore. Your business can go from whatever that is, $100 million block to the $1 billion block in a very short period of time, because you got that leg up, that advantage.
Yeah.
What do you guys see as sorry, go ahead, Simon.
No, I was just going to make a comment on that as well. Just, it's not necessarily that the advisor has to have any of those things in place. I think it's just like Nick said, it's just being open-minded. And in my case, even with Robert, he was open-minded, but he's bad with tech. He's just very, very bad with tech. And it wasn't even necessarily him saying, I'm going to learn all these things. It's him saying, let's implement all these things. Here's resources. Here's a young assistant. Help me do this behind the scenes. if you can do all this where I just have to show up to a client meeting and be friends with that client, you've got my vote, right? And I think that was really the key, was that he did what he wanted to do and what he liked to do, and I was able to implement everything behind the scenes to make it work. And he didn't even want any involvement in it per se, but he understood the importance of it.
Well, actually, I'm really glad I shushed and let you made that point, because that's a wonderful point to add on to Nick's. It feels like, I perceive it, that older advisors, and again, this isn't an episode about attacking older advisors, being like, get it in line. They're obviously awesome. We learned a lot from them. We want to be able to do things in a cohesive way, but it can be perceived as, okay, now adopting this technology is going to be a pain in my ass, is going to make me have to learn all this stuff, is going to be difficult. And what you just said was really important, because that can be the case if that's how you go about it. But there's, as long as we ask the right questions and great questions, we can get great answers. Okay, if an advisor isn't interested in learning anything new, cool. Then let me make your life way awesomer and easier. And I'll make sure to show you everything we're going to put together and why it's going to be awesome, easier. And they'll be able to still have the type of impact they want to have, but not have to go through the same type of labor. It'll actually remove and it doesn't even need to be that learning. If they're not interested in learning any of the new technologies, there's probably a way to put them in a position where they don't have to interact with it, right?
No, exactly. You let me know what has to be done. Like it's I'll give you an example. It's as simple as one of the biggest issues with Robert's efficiency was filling up forms. Some of the private equities that he sells requires a lot of disclosure, a lot of forms, a lot of KYCs, and he was and typically you got to keep doing it every year, because the difference between private equity and mutual funds is that you tend to buy it matures, you got to resell it, buy it, resell it, and there's a lot of paperwork involved in that, and sometimes it would be a thick 70-page thing. The paperwork never changes, but he would fill it out every year the same. And if you do that by hundreds of clients, now you're spending weeks, if not months, doing that. Sitting down with him like, hey, why don't we just pre-fill all this out onto a PDF, save that, and then you could just print it off. And he obviously was like, well, that's, you're not even speaking English anymore to me. But me sitting down with the assistant, helping her set everything up, making sure that this is what we do. We save it to the client file. He just emails me or our assistant, hey, I'm going to go see this client. Boom, paperwork sent to him. He prints it off, because he still doesn't really like using DocuSign. Prints it off, goes, signs it in person. Now he saved himself 2 hours of paperwork there,
Yeah, so
right?
still one signature over a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, like he still loves those wet signatures and getting in front of people and do it instead of doing DocuSign. But again, that's why I say
he doesn't love filling out the forms, though. He doesn't love filling out the forms.
Filling out forms. So again, that's why I say with new advisors coming in, even this is some advice to new advisors that are trying to get into a book. Really understand what that advisor, the older advisor wants, and help him, right? Like help him do what he wants to do, instead of trying to make it your own. Because honestly, the way I always see it is like, a lot of people have main character syndrome. They always think they're the main character of the story, and everyone wants to be Luke Skywalker, but you're not. Like when you're approaching this, think of yourself as Yoda. You're just there to help guide the hero onto his quest, and he's the main character of his own story. Help him out help him out to get to the point where he wants, and then you take over the business. Like, why do you want to be front and center at the expense of not being able to get the book? And I think that's the issue of a lot of advisors, is that it attracts a certain type of A-type personality. Where if you got a big ego, everyone wants to be the main character, and if you got 5 main characters, nothing gets done. Let's just say.
It's okay to be a
analogy,
sidekick.
though. Did you just come up with that? Where'd you hear that?
Actually, my good friend Hervin told me about that analogy. We
That's a good one.
we even do it with clients. We with clients. I think the big issue with advisors, they approach dealing with clients as if they are the main character, which means they will talk a lot about themselves. They will talk about their own services. instead of understanding what the actual client's wants, concerns, or needs are, and address those. That's always the thing. It's, let me tell you about all the products and services I have. It's never about what does the client want. You again, it goes back to, you're Yoda. You're there to help guide Luke Skywalker on his quest, and that being going from point A to point B in their finances. And I don't think a lot of people approach it that way.
which is actually a good thing that they teach you at the big bank call centers, or at least, one I was at, was just don't get on the phone, because your goal is typically, as you've seen in the news over the last 8 years, is they have you in a lot of positions and they want you focusing on a sale. When the client calls, shut up and listen to what they want before you start product dumping a whole bunch of stuff and proclaiming all the stuff you can offer them. Just do what they want you to do. Listen to them first. Then you can have a privilege of maybe introducing an additional insight into what's available.
100%. Yeah. I love that analogy, Simon. It kind of like goes to what we were talking about earlier, even with the sidekick analogy, right? It's okay to be a sidekick. But I will say that, one of the biggest things that an older advisor can do is come to the realization that it's not right for their clients not to have a proper succession plan. They are going to leave those people abandoned and swimming in cold water without a raft. They got to pay attention to this, and don't be so closed off with the young advisor. Bring in young advisors as you would your own children. Teach them the ways, show them how to be great advisors, and do it for your clients. If you want to be the main character, that's fine, be the main character. But main character still has to save people and protect the neighborhood, right? They have to be concerned of the others in the whole scheme of the financial planning. So think about your clients, welcome in these young advisors, and try and show that you're willing to grow and adapt with the times.
And I just want to add, if there's one thing I despise to hear, whether it's personally or professionally in my life, as a reasoning for doing something, is, well, this is the way that we've always done it. That's not a good reason. Not a good reason at all.
No,
and
a lot of companies did that.
Traditional things, whatever, but you guys will understand what I'm saying. That's not a critical thinking good reason to continue to do it in a way.
How many companies are still around today that 10 years ago said, we always did it this way?
Yeah. I think that's that's why I've always had a hard time being an employee, right? I hate that. I hate the idea of always doing things the same way. And that's the problem working in a big company, is that typically you can't make those changes, right? And I think it's a difficult thing. And again, back to I guess buying books and transitioning. I think like we were saying, advisors that are really open and they don't say comments like, that's always how we've done things. That just goes so far in terms of attracting a new buyer, because every young advisor you're going to meet is going to want to make improvements and add his own little flavor to the business. And that's not necessarily meaning that he's going to change everything that you've done in the past or rolled your legacy. I think, everyone wants to have some degree of leaving their mark on the business. And I think it is really important to listen to that new advisor and understand that maybe he's given you the benefit of saying, what do you want? I'm going to give you all those things. Maybe listen to him as well and understanding what he wants as well. Right.
Yeah. I'm going to go through some of the different things that, I research and listed as things that affect the value of business. And then the last one I'm going to ask you guys to comment on, because I actually ended up seeing, and unfortunately I don't have all of them in front of me now, there was quite a few statistics that were compelling statistics. Even talking about upwards of 20 and 25% increase of the value of the book of business. So some of the things, obviously the size of the book of business, if there's assets under management, or how many insurance policies or whatever, the type, how many clients, the type of clients. So they, for the advisor side of the retirees, high net worth, self-employed. On the mortgage side, it could be, is this somebody that's an investor in multiple properties, different things like that. The location of the practice is on that list, but I will quickly ask you guys if you think that relevant anymore, because I don't. believe that's relevant. Oh, however, sorry, I'll say it's relevant if you don't have a remote experience that you've created. Then it's very relevant. Because now you have to drive somewhere to get a signature from Afghanistan.
I think location is relevant. If you're locked into a lease, let's say in a very large office, and no one shows up to that office, right? You got like 20 empty offices, and yeah, then it's very relevant if you're paying like 30 grand in costs, right? And you're stuck, right? I would say that's relevant, but the actual location itself, yeah, definitely no.
Yeah,
and I would say avoid those firms as best you can. If you walk into the office and nobody's in there,
Yes.
and it's very posh and very flashy and very nice, but you're wondering how they're keeping the lights on. This industry is full of smoke and mirrors, right? It's fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And these old expressions that just make no sense. One thing I love about Larry is, this guy could afford very nice vehicles. He could afford very nice things. And he does buy very nice things, but he's not a guy who's flashy by any means. And he's more about like, let's be efficient with the business. We're gonna properly look at, okay, what's our marketing budget this year? Not let's move our office to the highest tower view of overlooking the city and give myself some private parking and go out to the most ridiculous steakhouses for.
Well, there's people in every industry that are political masqueraders and tremendous at it.
Yeah.
So I guess we can agree that the advisor, it says another one is advisors, experience, and reputation. So obviously that one's a little bit tough though at the same time, because you can say, well, my reputation, but at the same time, your reputation is now exiting. So I think that there is something there, but I mean, you can't necessarily say it's like your reputation isn't at 100% infinitely. I mean, that people respect your reputation is, but the presence of your reputation, I guess.
Well, here's the issue with that, Sheldon. Reputation is important because if this guy's been investigated by the Securities Commission 4 times, it's been suspended twice. Yeah, that book's not going to be worth a lot, because I don't want to step into landmines, because a lot of times if someone's been investigated even once and been convicted once, there's typically significantly more landmines in that book to be still found. And the issue is that a lot of times when you take over a book, you become responsible for the problems in that book, and you don't want to lose your license over that. So if let's just say if the advisor is known as someone that is a pure sales guy that may have somewhat shaky morals, you definitely don't want to work with that person, regardless of how, regardless of what kind of deal they give you on the book, because you're just going to lose your license. Let's just say probably.
Yeah, get buddy with them and go out for a beer and let them start like really telling you how they really do things, and hopefully it sounds like something still admirable.
Listen to those key words too, right? Like if they keep talking about how much they make and how much these policies get sold every year, and it's all about these product dumping conversations, those are some red flags for those young buying advisors. That's
true. So obviously the quality of systems and processes, which includes onboarding and technology and those processes, that's a massive impact. What we spent a lot of the time talking about is the incredible amount of potential waste, and then forget the waste, the reallocation of that time to providing better service, better experience. Because again, like you said, it's not that and just to fairly kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, something you said earlier. I don't think any of us believes that somebody that's between 70 and 80 can't be very intellectually and academically and financial planningly competent. It's about, if you're doing things in an old way, that's why you can't be given good service, because you're over inundated. You may not even feel overwhelmed, but you can be over inundated without being overwhelmed, without being able to offer your best to those around you. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. I think to an extent, for sure. I mean, I know I've met a lot of people that are in their 60s and 70s that are very, very with it. But it's like
some of them are able to beat me up in their 80s.
They probably could. But I will say one thing is I have yet to see 65 and 70-year-old people playing in the NHL. Right? It's not that they lost their skills or they weren't as great of a hockey player, because they could probably still skate circles around me, some of these 60, 70-year-old ex-pros, but they can't play in the game. It's just faster. And they're doing things that are done differently, and they were brought up in a training regimen that was different than it was 40 years ago. You know, same as us. Like, I know me, I grew up on the technology. I grew up being able to problem solve. Like, Simon, we talk about this all the time, where it's like some people just can't even problem solve the tech. You need the younger advisors to come in there to help show you how to move your practice into the future. If you can't problem solve tech, like it pops up and says error, and you don't know where to start on how to try and fix that error, you'll just sit there for 17 hours doing nothing, right? Or you'll call a guy on a tech line and they'll say, yeah, can you do this? And you're like, huh? What? I don't know. What?
Well,
what are you talking about?
The sports analogy is kind of fun to think about, because if you don't innovate in sports, for example, hockey, you're in trouble. Because if everybody else on the other team is running around with a helmet on and you don't have one and you get hit, you're in trouble. And yeah, you might think with an advisor, oh, I don't. Your hit is your revenue, but you don't ever know that you got hit and you got a concussion, because you don't know that you lost what. You know what I mean? Like, if you could have earned an extra 100,000 this year, but it doesn't really occur to you because you don't see the gap, you don't know you lost that money, but you still lost that money. You still lost that money in this opportunity cost. The first time I heard the term opportunity cost was a financial advisor talking to me about their client's opportunity cost in not using financial advice. Well, in the same way, you're and when you go to sell your book of business, you're getting a concussion. And you may not feel it, like, in a self-aware way, but you're feeling it. And when those times come where you don't have as much as you wanted to necessarily retire, do all the things you want, there was a lot of micro decisions that led up to that macro decision of now everything being in this state. So I love the sports analogy.
Yeah, and it's a value-based business now, right? Like, that's why there's such heavy focus on financial planning and getting designated. And, you can pass, in most cases, you can get your life license being barely able to speak English. Like, is that really a qualification to providing good quality financial advice to the public, is having a license? I don't know if I agree with that. I think there's so many other values you have to bring to the table, where a lot of things can be figured out online for most clients. If they want to learn what is a TFSA, that's not a value that your financial planner is bringing to you. You can just Google what is a TFSA. You're going to get a really good answer, right? It's the other things. It's not just product dumping and this high level junk that used to work in the 90s, because information was hard to get in the 90s. It is super easy to get information now. They might not be able to understand the information, and that's where the value comes, right? Hey, I read something somewhere. I saw something somewhere. Can you explain this to me? And Simon's really great at this technical language, because he's got that technical background in accounting. He can hear something, pick it up, say, no, don't do this because of this. And that's really where I see the future of financial planning and advice going. I look for books where I say, hey, did that financial planner do financial planning? Or did they just sell a whole bunch of insurance policies that are probably written in a way that's going to be, like Simon said, walking into a minefield? I don't really care if there's good revenue if I'm continually having to dodge $10,000 mistakes.
Yeah, and I'm going to use another sports analogy, because both of us love this, Sheldon, this sport. But let's talk about martial arts here. Like, let's look at a fighter from 2020, a UFC fighter from 2023. Even a C-level fighter from UFC in 2023 can beat probably the world champion, Kung Fu champion from 1990, because the sport has accelerated and it's become efficient. Everything's been tested and tried, and it's down to a science now how to beat someone up. And and you need to know, you can't just go in just knowing one. And I look at that like Nick said, that guy that just knows how to box, that's like just a guy that just knows how to, that just has his life insurance license. You need all these other aspects to make it so that you're well-rounded enough to deal with every type of situation. Because the problem is, and again, if you only know how to punch and you don't know how to stop a takedown, you don't know how to throw a kick, you don't know how to throw elbows and knees, that's your only solution to every problem. Someone tries to take you down, you got to punch them. Someone's trying to break your arm, you got to punch them. You have no other skill sets to stop it. It's the same thing with financial planning. If you only know insurance, insurance is your only solution to every problem. And a lot of times insurance is not the right solution.
You guys so perfectly segued both of those points. I love the martial arts one because like I'm still of the mind of like an 11-year-old that wants to believe that one of those like Shaolin monks to just go in and beat up like 10 people and like block people with a finger and do like this crazy stuff. But really in a fight, they're never going to ask you to balance on a spear without it puncturing your whatever. But I do love those analogies. But you both segued nicely into, because you mentioned, Nick, the insurance folks or even wealth folks that, and there's nothing against those folks. We all can have our niche, but then if you don't do financial planning, what are you doing to collaborate effectively with somebody that does? So you're offering a more holistic value. And again, I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of stats you can Google out there or chat GPT now that talk about a significant increase for the clients in their financial planning outcome success and for the financial advisors. And in the same way you segued, Simon, in that MMA is now, which is what it should be, because if you have access to 1 billion pieces of information on this earth, let's say you only have access to 1,000 pieces of information on this earth. You want all of the best pieces of information from all the best places, right? You don't just want the best information on nutrition. You might also want the best on, exercise or critical thinking or engineering or financial planning, whatever it is. So the way that they've innovated and evolved mixed martial arts is they've taken the best out of all of these different practices. And in the same way, we should be collaborating as financial professionals. So I'll quickly mention the one before that. Having a strong marketing plan was mentioned. And I think having automated ways where you can offer value and work your current book and stuff like that is valuable to a book of business. I'd be interested if I'm getting 1,000 clients, 200 clients, 500, whatever it is, if there is something that I think there'd be some influence there, if there's some type of like regular engagement that's already set up and it's kind of already in the game as opposed to me having to orchestrate it from scratch. But the collaboration, and I'll get Nick, since you're so superb at it, to give the teeniest, barely revealing intrigue little plug for Pocket Finance at the end. We'll get Simon to go first. Being a member of a network of other financial professionals when it's mentioned on every single list. And again, there was tons of interesting stats on it. A lot more revenue per client, a lot more cross referrals. And it's going to provide that person insight into those other things. There is, and I don't want to just add this before I pass it over to you guys, because this is really important. I'm going to hold all financial professionals' feet to the fire over this. Mortgage brokers are able to sell creditor insurance. And if it's a good, smart mortgage broker, then they should have a decent preliminary understanding, at least at a service level, of insurance. And I respect that. But it's not what I wouldn't do that for my grandmother. If my grandmother said, buzz off, I don't want to talk to anybody but you, and I just want that, I will do it because it's better than none. But I would prefer for them to deal with somebody that's a true professional. In the same way, though, while financial advisors would always agree with that, financial advisors and other professionals within that space, the planners, they have access to the Manulife One, which, and there's all these different products. And all these products are good. And I don't think there's no time or no place at all for, but even just to have a conversation with a broker, if you're going to offer with them, I think is good to consider, at least, because there's a silo of information. And sure, we have access to our little tidbits. I've had access to lots of tidbits, but there's lots that I don't want to go in and then champion the advice on when it's not something. So working on that collaboration, how do you guys see that impacts the success of the client, the success of the advisor, but most important to topic, the value of the book of business and having, and even I'll add one last thing, is the layers of adding those layers of those age gaps, I think is really interesting, even within those networks. And I've never thought about that until you guys kind of brought that up today, but I'll hold the advisor's feet to the fire. If you want to advocate for you're the specialist, then we should also be doing it in the same way, consulting with others, not trying to just get all the extra revenue by throwing something in that we don't really know in totality how to advise on. Simon.
So I think I'm going to go back to a comment Nick said, is that information is easily accessed now. So if you're a professional in the financial services industry that has very broad knowledge, but is very shallow, anyone could go on the internet and find that nowadays. That is a useless skill set. You need to be very deep and very specialized, which is what, both me and Nick recognized early in our careers. And the problem with being very deep and very specialized is that you will need good partners to work with you. If I only know how to do this one specific thing very well, I want someone else there to be by my side to help me. I'll give you an example. I'm great at a lot of the tax and corporate structuring, and I will understand that, when I'm calculating out estate tax, I understand there's a need for insurance. I can do the calculations to show how much tax you'll decrease, but I am by no means an insurance expert, and I will not have the skill set required to actually structure a policy to the best possible outcome for the client. And a lot of times I'll depend on Nick because he is much better on the insurance side and the structuring side than I am. And it requires both of us to basically put together the perfect solution for a client's estate problem with an insurance package a lot of times. And I think that's really the benefit of really having a team. And even with, anyone, if you're looking at a business that you're looking to take over, I think again, like if this guy just had a very broad, shallow skill set, and the clients just kind of are in there, like, why? My question is, like, if he's just telling them to max out their TFSAs, max out their RSPs every year, what's to stop that client from really leaving? At the end of the day, if you don't have any specialized knowledge and a deeper understanding of this client's actual finances, that is almost kind of, I think the book is at a bigger danger to take over, because the reason is, I think that a lot of the times the client is staying because of the relationship, not because necessarily of the value that the advisor has brought in.
Okay.
But yeah.
That's interesting. So there almost, you could submit that there's less goodwill with less other specialized kind of collaboration.
Well, if you think about it, if you've got a client that has this advisor that's got a very specialized skill set, he's got a bunch of team members on his team that has all these other skill sets, and one guy in the team's done estate planning, one guy's done retirement planning, they've got a CFA doing investment planning, they've got an accountant helping with the taxes, they've got a lawyer that has done all the corporate structuring, they got another lawyer that's done all the wills. When you step into that team, you're way safer, let's just say, because that client would have to leave that whole team. He'd have to leave.
I was just gonna say, and stickier. Yeah.
But if that one advisor, again, was doing all 5 of those things by himself and doing a shitty job on each 5 of those things, not to say that maybe there are some advisors that can do a good job on all those things, it's very difficult for you just to step in as a new guy and say that you could do all those things. And again, it's way easier to leave you than to leave 5 other specialists that's on the team as well.
Let me unpack that even farther. Imagine if you're working with a financial professional that does all of those things for you, or they say that they do all those things, and they're very sheltered off. Like, they don't want you meeting any other financial professionals, or they don't want you talking to any other financial professionals. You got to ask yourself as a client, why is that? They're probably very nervous and very insecure that whatever it is you're telling them or showing them or advising them is going to get blown up pretty quickly. They're trying to shelter you and create almost like that communistic socialism. They don't want you to know what's going on in the rest of the world, right? I am the be all end all, master of all, right? I know for me, any of my clients go and they meet with another CFP. Any of my clients go and they meet with other professionals in our network. And we actually, Simon, you and I, we try and do this constantly. We're trying to bring in all the other specialists in the client's life to help build out their plan, because there is no insecurity. We're great at what we're doing, and we're not afraid of anybody else having a conversation with anyone we're working with, because we truly know that we're the best of the best. We're not sheltered away on a tiny little island somewhere trying to keep everybody on the island, telling them that the world's on fire on the other side of the water.
That's an interesting angle on the book of business aspect too. Then it's not actually helping or protecting your book of business when you're have what can be you hear about, I've heard about it a lot in the industry, is there's a, not for everybody by any stretch, but There's a lot of people that can feel, as soon as you're talking to any kind of other financial professional, you're worried that they're going to like counter something you've said, but that really is just insecurity. If you're confident in what you've told the client, if you listen to the client's needs, you should be, go ahead and verify with somebody else how awesome the advice I gave you was.
Well, the thing is, if they come and counter what we've done, me and Nick we have like a 40-page financial plan with calculations and numbers and backed up data from accountants, lawyers backing up what we're saying. It's not just an opinion, but the problem with a lot of advisors in the past is what they say is just their opinion. They've never actually necessarily taken a deeper look at what is needed. Because if you ask a lot of clients, and we've seen this again, time and time again, Nick, where we talk to a client and we'll be like, why did you get this large universal life policy on the personal side? I have no idea. My advisor told me that's the only, I should get it. That is easy to rip apart. But if we ask one of our clients, why did you get it? He can pull out his report, say, these are the calculations that they did. This is all the benefits it has. Here's what the accountant said to me. Here's what the lawyer said to me. It's a lot easier to defend that than to defend opinion, right?
You're right. The summary is there, and it's features, it's benefits, it's pros, it's cons, it's 17 different potential scenarios. Maybe not 17 different scenarios on every particular plan, but we're stress testing. We're running different options. Hey, what if you do this and not that? What if you do this and that? And we're showing all the different outcomes of if they did certain things, so that it's truly an analysis-based approach, and it's product agnostic. Like the product will present itself after we've run multiple different scenarios to see, what do you like best? Do you like the looks of this better? Do you like the looks of this better? Do you like the looks of that better? And we're being as openly honest and transparent as we can around pitfalls. And we're letting them know when we say something, we say, well, this is our general feeling and opinion about it, but we have seen it successful if XYZ happens, right? Are you comfortable with XYZ? And if XYZ is a little too risky for their level of tolerance, they're probably going to back away and say, yeah, you know what, you're right. My buddy who did that, or my wife who did that, or my friend or my colleague at work who did that, they're a lot riskier than me. So that's probably why they're telling me to do that.
And I remember what I was going to say now. I was going to say, basically, you guys are making the math teachers of the universe proud, because you can actually show your long math, as opposed to just having a general overlying blanket theory for everyone, such as in some cases could be certain organizations just selling universal life.
Exactly. We're showing our work on how we came to the answer. Some people just like when a client, again, that's a good example. When a client a lot of times will ask an advisor, what's 100 times 100? The advisor will be like, it's 90. No, the answer.
My mentor told me, and he told me it would make me $900,000 this year if I said it. So that's the answer.
So the problem is, as soon as you just throw an answer out there with nothing to back it up, that's easy to rip apart. Even if the answer is right, it still causes doubt in the client's head. But if we showed all our calculations on how we got to the answer, it's a lot easier. And especially if there's, like you said, multiple professionals that also have come in and said, okay, I've looked at this. This looks good. So we've gotten second opinions, third opinions. It's a little bit easier to accept that answer and remember that answer. So,
well, we're going to end with, and I'll give full disclosure, we are all involved in technology and innovation, but I'm going to get Nick. Nick, if somebody wanted to digitize their praxis, whether they're young and starting out and wanted to make sure to package it smartly from the beginning, or whether they're getting older in their years and they want to make sure to plug in executors and have that transfer and take over those use in the family, if they want to collaborate more intelligently with other professionals, streamline data, take advantage of some of these efficiencies that you guys elaborated on, what would one do?
Well, I'll tell you, like we're experiencing the evolution of advisory. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. Our industry went on to Zoom. All these other technologies are coming out, DocuSign, what have you. The list is endless. But one thing that holds true is that clients need simplicity. Clients need ease of understanding. Clients need to know that their financial life is not going to take away all of the enjoyments out of that hardworking week that they put in. So if you can have everything in their financial life, all the financial professionals that they're working with in one spot, one location, one app, one easy to use utility on their phone, that is what Pocket Finance is doing. Pocket Finance is not only providing greater efficiencies for the advisors and professionals in the world, it's truly about the client. It's a client-centric focus. We're trying to make the client experience better, trying to get rid of the noise, and we're trying to make sure that financial planners are collaborative, that accountants are collaborative, that all the professionals that you're working with in your life are collaborative. And that means that you're going to get specialists, people that are not afraid to show others their plan or their advice or their guidance that they're giving you.
So we'll each take a last word of just what we want to speak on this topic. Remember, the topic is succession planning. We're talking both to the younger advisors, but to the older advisors as well. It's take your power. You've got, scrutinize the business. Don't, give fair treatment to each side. Neither one is a god that is like, begging the other, but there should be a good respect shown for each side, and scrutinize the book that you're buying and demand that there is some of these things in place that really bolster that value, especially being able to collaborate with others and having that additional stickiness.
I guess my last thoughts on everything is really that at the end of the day, when it comes to anyone looking to buy a book of business, and I think I'm going to speak more to advisors of our generation versus the selling advisor, because there's obviously a lot. I'm guessing there's going to be more of those type of advisors that are going to watch this, and I think there was one thing that wasn't really mentioned today about what was important about buying a book of business, and I think it's make sure that you like the advisor you're buying the book from business from, because you're going to be stuck with them for a number of years. A lot of their clients are going to have personalities that are suited to that advisor, and you're going to be dealing with those type of clients as well. And I'll give a shout out to Robert. As much as you frustrate me sometimes because you remind me of my dad. He's taught me a lot, and he generally we're really good friends now, and we get along, and I think that's something that maybe a lot of younger advisors tend to maybe not take into consideration is, do I get along with this older advisor? Am I going to get along with the clients? Am I going to like working with this person? Because at the end of the day, money is great, and having this revenue generating book of business is great. But if you hate the clients you deal with, and you hate the advisor that you took the book from, it's just not worth it.
The benefits of self-employment are taken away.
Yeah.
What it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Nick, what did ChatGPT tell you that your final words should be? Bleep, blop, blorp.
Yeah.
Just joking.
Yeah, who knows? It told me how to take over the world or whatever people are afraid of. But yeah, I would say I would leave a final thought. I think Simon's right. Let's speak to the people that are probably listening to us, and they're most likely the up and coming generation of advisor. What I would say is I'll second Simon's with a little bit of a twist. Like, you cannot come into any kind of relationship with an ego. Like, you're the stud, you're the young buck, you're the next one to win the race. Truly take a humble approach. This person that you're trying to buy a book of business from, they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and had a lot of uncertainty in their life around building that block. And it means a lot to them. It's another child to them. Respect that. You're trying to marry into this relationship the same way you would be one of their children. So come into that with open minds. There's a level of respect that always needs to be there outside of just liking them and getting along with them. Like Simon said, Robert reminds him a little bit of his father. That probably happened by design, without him even realizing it. He was drawn to that relationship. I find that Larry and I are very similar as well, just with a bit of an age gap. And we have to like each other, but I definitely respect what he has built. I can see areas of efficiency because of my age, what I bring to the table, my new way of looking at things, and my advancement in technology. But what he built's impressive. And I look back and say, hey, could I have built that if I got into the business in the 90s with the technology and the tools that they had back then? So that layer of respect and lack of ego is necessary.
Those some good ass final words. And I'm glad you even mentioned the way comparing it to a kid, because like it really is that. As entrepreneurs, we want control on both sides, the buyer, the seller. You want control to be able to mold it into something that can be even awesomer. You want control to make sure that your child isn't mistreated on the way, going out with these dates with this hot young stud financial advisor that might be coming in to try to take advantage, or not take advantage, but take over. So yeah, wonderful conversation, gentlemen. Look forward to the next one.